Marvin and Johnny with, and then Tony Allen with, and I, Cleve Duncan, along with the Penguins, will sing Earth Angel, Earth Angel, will you be mine at El Monte? If I could go back to those days of the past, I'd show you a love that would last. Oh, I remember those wonderful dances in El Monte. In El Monte, ooh, Earth Angel, Earth Angel.
You cheated, you lied, you said that you loved me. You cheated, you lied, you said.
And welcome everyone to TVOSJ, the voice of San Joaquin, right here off the Miracle Mile. Oh, I love those oldies but goodies. Always did, always will, and I'm going to play them forever, you know. Today I do have my guest, and thank you everyone that has tuned into your community radio station, the voice of San Joaquin. This is Sabor Latino with Betty Ramirez. Thank you so much. Do appreciate it when you tune in. All right, so we are on Facebook, we are on live on YouTube as well, and I wanted to welcome my guest. That's Robert J. Reinart. And I want to make sure that I have your, okay, let's do a voice reading so that way I know that your mic works pretty good. Go ahead.
Mic works just fine.
Okay, got you. Good reading of your voice. And of course, are you, I know that you're part of this wonderful Heritage Writers community.
That's right.
Tell me, give me some information, give me a little bit of history, when it started.
Well, I started the Heritage Writers community.
Perfect.
In 2006. And we had just a handful of people, and we met twice a month at the main library downtown.
That was Cesar Chavez?
Yeah, the
Cesar Chavez Library. That takes me way back. And of course, it wasn't the Cesar Chavez Library back in my days. But it was, what was it? The Stockton Library, I'm trying to remember. No, San Joaquin. It was
San Joaquin Library.
Yes, the San Joaquin Community Public Library, I do recall. Okay.
And we used to meet and start critiquing each other's work. What I had been looking for, first let me tell you a little bit about me.
Oh, please do.
When I was a youngster, school age, I did my work in mathematics. And I majored in mathematics at college and then went to graduate school, University of Illinois.
What college did you go to?
Lake Forest College.
Okay.
Well, I went to Notre Dame for 2 years and then went to Lake Forest College for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I became employed at the Pacific Missile Range as a mathematician. And I worked there, and from the time I had arrived in California, with some pots and pans, $100, and a promise of a job from Douglas Aircraft.
Well, at least you started with $100.
Yeah, and a computer engineer.
There you go.
And nobody had any idea what that was, because in 1957, when I arrived, there were only 6 computer installations in the entire country that had digital computers that hired programmers and so on. So that was quite an experience.
Wow, interesting.
And most of my life until the 90s was in technical work, writing research papers, doing studies, and that kind of stuff. So I was on a consulting assignment down in Fresno, commuting back and forth. And it was a little too far to do it every day. So I took a little apartment down there, and in the evening, looking for something to do, I went to the local junior college. They had 2 classes that I could apply for. One was bass fishing, and the other was writing for publication. I flipped a coin because I had no real driving interest in either one, and ended up in the writing class. And the teacher liked what I was doing and gave me encouragement, and so there I was. You know, it's when you're in, people who've gone to writing seminars and classes and so on are always familiar with a little story that the people will stand up and say, I knew when I was 6 years old that I was going to be a writer. That's what I wanted to do, and that's my life mission. And then I never had any interest in writing at all, not in that sense. I had to write, researchy reports, but I never had an interest in fiction writing. So when I undertook to do my first writing, and that ended up in this, if you can see that, this historical novel took me 10 years to write, because in addition to
10 years to write, you say?
Yeah, 10 years.
Tell me about it. And why did it take 10 years?
Well, because in addition to doing the kind of research that historical writing requires, I had to learn how to write. I had no idea about story arc or character development, that kind of stuff. Those were all new to me, and I had to learn, how do you make a story interesting to people?
Yes.
So that was how I started, and so come back to the origins of Heritage Writers Community. I didn't know of the existence of any writer groups in town, so I started one. There are actually quite a few little writer groups now, but they all tend to be small. They pop up. They're 2, 3, 5, 6 people, and they last for 6 months, and then everybody kind of goes their separate ways.
Moves on to something different.
Yeah.
I see that this is a winner, Self-Publishing San Francisco Writers Conference.
Yeah.
I love it.
That's a very prestigious group. It's probably the most prominent one on the West Coast. And when they have their meetings, and then I'll be going to the one in February, all the big New York firms send their editors and agents out to the conference. So Random House and Penguin Books and that crowd are all there.
Penguin Books?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Continue. Okay, 10 years.
What we wanted to do with the Heritage Writers Community, as our mission kind of evolved over the years, we not only wanted to just provide support and feedback to each other for our own writing, we wanted to be able to get it out to a wider audience, to give public showing to our work. And so we started out by giving readings at retirement homes and nursing homes, and in some small retail shops. And after a while, we came to find a home at the Hagen Museum, where we are today, still. They haven't gotten tired of us, and we're still love them.
That's a wonderful place.
Yes, it is, and we find that the environment of the museum is evocative for writers. It
Yes.
stimulates your
Yes.
thinking, and it's a good environment to
Yes, I
try to
agree.
be creative in. So we have put on public readings there and produced a chapbook like these. We've given one or two readings, public readings every year as part of their program, and published at least one chapbook every year. And hi, Jim Fox. Hi, Jim. Jim,
Welcome, Jim.
Mr. Fox is one of our early writers, participants, and one of the strongest ones. If you're looking at the covers, he's been the editor-in-chief and producer of all the chapbooks that we've put out, and including cover design and putting the interior together. And it's hard to imagine how much work is involved in that. Maybe we'll get him to talk about that a little bit here, if he doesn't mind, if it doesn't cause him to have headaches. One of the very first chapbooks that we ever put out there from the museum was this one, called Reflections on Water.
That's a beautiful picture, too. Reflections on Water. Okay.
Well, that was one of the exhibits, and the way this thing worked was that we supported various exhibits that they'd have, and so we would write our own original work, stories, poems, little maybe haikus, in support of the exhibit.
Museum. Wow.
And that worked for the museum, and it worked for us.
Beautiful. I'm an artist myself, so when I see artwork like this, is quality. I have to stop and say, wow.
That cover is of a painting that is owned by the Hagen.
And please state your name, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Jim Fox.
And give me your title, a little background.
Well, I'm a working credit manager, so I write when I can, and I've had about 15 short stories published and a couple of poems, and working on I would like to call it a Civil War novel, but it's actually based on a true event, so it's not much of a novel, more of a retelling of a story that should be told, and that it's a lot harder than I thought. Short stories come to me rather easily. I warn people that because I write, I'm able to stalk my family and friends for ideas. So
Wonderful. Okay. So let's continue. I mean, this is the first piece you were saying, right, Robert?
Mm-hmm.
And okay, tell me, why don't you do a little bit of reading? Because
Let
I'm
me do
interested
that. I'd like
in.
to do that, and let me just start with, since this was one of our first
Yes.
events and one of our first publications.
Perfect.
Let me pick something out of here. I've always liked this one. It's one of the very first ones that I wrote. And with Jim's help, we got it published in the Peat Duster, which is an organ of the Sierra Club.
Okay.
It's a publication of the Sierra Club. And this is called the California Delta. Section 1, Genesis. In the beginning there was rain. Some winter rain turned to snow. The pristine mantle draped the Sierra. The mountains smiled and said, "It is good." Some rain pelted the golden fields. The rain soaked the ground. The water table rose and the roots could drink. And the gray pine and the live oak said, "It is good." The rain-mixed snowmelt ran down the slopes, then tumbled through the foothills. Water torrentialated through creek and stream. The Tule elk and the black bear said, "It is good." And the water ran down through the bay to sea, now rushing, now swirling, formed an estuary, a bracing brew of salt and fresh water. The steelhead and the egret said, "It is good." And all the bounty of the earth was plentiful. For thousands of years it was so. The immense fish migrations gave testimony, and it was good. Part 2 is titled The Advent of Man. We heard the calls, we read the news, gold in the hills, the hard men are coming. Marshland for sale, buy it cheap. If you want it easy, go raise sheep. So we came from distant lands, we came alone, we came in droves. We were miners, merchants, farmers and hands. We wanted the gold, we took the lands. Fighting and tugging on this mighty Sierra drain, we levied the rivers that made this huge Tule. We dried the land, we bridged, we dammed, and we piped. This fluid of wealth became our blood of life. Then to the ocean we poured, then to be clean, we poured our waste into the water and the air. We poisoned ourselves, we poisoned the bear, we poisoned the salmon and cut down the wood. This we did. It was not good. And part 3, living with our legacy. So now we are citizens of the sewer. Our dulled senses know not our folly. We are evolution's triumph. We eat our muck and think it jolly. Rivers and air are resources of public trust. They are in our care. Do not allow our wealth to be degraded. Bodies are not insulated by water, by bottled water or filtered air. Poison in our body attacks our health. All our infrastructure is eroded by growth. It is all interrelated. People still come to this once golden land of wealth. Our life still moves through the delta. Rivers are still sewers. The skies are sewers. Our water, our air, our land are not good. Could we not be good stewards?
Wow. That hits you. That hits you hard.
It's
But
a
it's
story
real.
of California.
But it's real. Wow.
I notice myself the difference. I came to California in 1957, fall of 57. And it really was the Golden State. We had the best, practically the only freeways in the country. Our schools were all the best there were. The streets were good, the sewers were good, lots of new building going on.
A lot of agriculture even back then. And
Yeah, a lot
I
of
recall
agriculture.
wheat fields upon miles and miles and miles. And all of a sudden it's all developed. Now it's like, where did the wheat fields go?
Now the streets are potholed,
Overpopulated.
overpopulated. It is not good.
Yeah.
Jim, tell them
What do you say to that, Jim?
I tend to agree. I sometimes try to balance the darkness that I feel in my life by writing in an upbeat method. I use what is often called a creative nonfiction. Can't remember all the details, but you remember the main facts, the names, the faces, and that's the style of writing that I have preferred to write in. And as I said, I've had some short stories published in Affectionately Yours, which you were showing just a few minutes ago.
Yes.
I'd like to share a couple out of that, very short one.
But before that, Jim,
Yes.
what you said that you chose to write this style. Did you know, as a teenager, as a child, that that's something that you wanted to do, that you wanted to become a writer?
Actually not.
When did you know that? Because me and Robert were talking about that exactly, because he's come across individuals that said that they knew that they wanted to be a writer when they were 5, 6 years old.
Yeah, no, it hit me rather late. The first foray into it was actually my 25th high school reunion was coming up, and they had suggested some memories about certain teachers that we had, and there was a teacher, very demanding English teacher, and I had
English, okay.
I had written what I recall. It was actually a story that he told, and I wrote it as well as I could remember. And then that idea fell through. They didn't collect any of those, and so it sat in a drawer somewhere. And then with my sons, I have 2 boys and a girl, and they were all in Scouts. And when my sons were, I always tease them. They're 6 years apart, so I tell them I was in Scouts longer than they were, because once you have a child in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, you'll always be on the committee, or you'll be a Scoutmaster.
You'll be involved some way, somehow.
Yes. So, but during some Scoutmaster training, we were challenged to do something for ourselves instead of just for the troop or for our own children. And I thought about it, and at that time, as a working credit manager, like I say, I like to turn sometimes to the light. And I had noticed how dry our trade magazine was, and I had proposed just a quick little column to the side. I called it Insights, INCITES.
Insights.
And I would get, I try to find quotes and proverbs about money, about business. And then every now and then I'd slip in one of my original quips. That way I'm in there with Mark Twain and Gibran, and it's just a little, a good little ego boost. But I sat down and I wrote a story. I said, well, maybe I could get something published in Boys Life magazine. Well, the piece I ended up with was more suited to scouting, which is for the adult scouters. And I sent that in. It actually got published. And then my daughter, in reading it, showed me where I needed to improve my writing. Because in order to insert, it was a story about a raccoon, tracking a raccoon. In order to insert a little cartoon of this raccoon, they carved out my whole description of a rainstorm. And my daughter...
Wow.
was reading and said, Dad, you rewrote it and it's so much better. Well, the editors rewrote it. I didn't. So at that point, I jumped onto, actually, I took an online community college course. It was actually being run by Delta right here in Stockton with June Gilliam. We all learned one another's email names. Mine's Foxtail, Tale, to tell a story. Uh-huh. And she's Junebug. But... It was. I really needed that. It helped me structure my stories tighter. At that point, I started off and quarterly the Front Porch periodical, which was found. The only place I found it in California was in San Mateo, but all along the Piedmont in the East Coast and then in the Midwest, I seemed to strike a chord with the heartland. And I think that's because my formative years, I was born, I like to say, right at the western terminus of Highway 66, not out on Santa Monica Pier, but I was born in Santa Monica. And then my dad had been called back to Korea as a Marine aviator. So coming back from that, he spent another about 8 years in the Marines. And so we were on the East Coast. The time he was in Korea, we were actually staying with my grandparents, my mother's parents, in Hutchinson, Kansas. And I think I picked up a meter and just a style of writing that attracts that heartland reader. Mm-hmm. And so that's where a majority of my stories were published. And this that I like to read is one of them. It's based on this is a true story. And I called it Fire and Ice. It was just a quick little quip. Front Porch helped me hone my skills even better because depending on where they were going to run a story, they would demand you drop words until you reached, maybe 910 words or whatever, because they had an advertisement or a cartoon or something to fit in on the page. So this one's Fire and Ice.
Okay.
The love of my life married me. We're now 3 decades into our marriage. But still, the fact that Marcia ever married me is a surprise, especially when I think back to that fateful evening at a swanky restaurant. Although we were both in college and money was tight at the time, I was able to find a nice restaurant that was within my budget. And luckily, we'd been seated in a cozy booth with a candle flickering romantically in the tabletop centerpiece. I guess the waitress there must have recognized we were a young couple out on a dinner date. Although she professionally attended to our needs, she didn't hover around our table as we engaged in the small talk and nervous banter of 2 people getting to know each other. We'd been on a few dates, and I really liked Marcia, but she wasn't being very talkative, so I was nervous, hoping the evening was going well. Then, while Marcia seemed to be listening attentively to my verbal meanderings, I picked up that fateful water glass. Now, I've always had a bad habit of sipping water out of a glass until I can toss back the bits of ice to munch on. And that's what I did on our second date. But perhaps the waitress was a little too efficient, for I swear I had not seen her come by and refill my water glass. Boosh! I tossed a whole glass of ice water into my face. Marcia held out, stone-faced, for about 20 seconds. Then, with a gasp at having suppressed a laugh, she exploded into laughter. Then, still giggling and with tears in her eyes, she dabbed at my face and shirt with her napkin. It must have been love at first splash, because she married me anyway. And sometimes now, when we're out to dinner at a table set with a flickering candle, I swear I see a twinkle in Marcia's eyes whenever one of the waitstaff asks if they may refill our water glasses.
Beautiful. I have to applaud that one. I loved it. I felt it. And, when you write like that, that says a lot about the individual.
Yeah. Well, it scares my dog, and my family got tired of me because I read aloud and I walk as I'm reading. And I think I just do that to get the pacing or the meter in what I'm writing. I'll write a first draft, and then I just start walking around reading out loud, listening to the meter. And
Interesting.
so
Interesting.
there you'll also find that, like you're not saying never, nevermore. You're not repeating words within a same paragraph, which is distracting to a reader.
Yes.
So
Yes, and that's something that a lot of people will do, even as they speak. And I hear that a lot. I'm about to say, no, I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Oh, you mean like the kids do? Like
like. I'm like, yes, okay, like what? Yes.
Yeah.
So, okay, what would you tell a young reader, because I have two young ladies that are my daughters. They're quite the readers, and one thing I did do when I was much younger is introduce reading to them, because I didn't have that in my younger years. Daddy was in agriculture all his life. If they picked up a book, it was the newspaper, the alarma, Spanish alarma. The newspaper, yes, we'd pick it up every now and then, and we could borrow one from the neighbor. But reading wasn't in my upbringing. So when I got into school, I got into it. And one of my favorite books, and still today, is The Black Stallion, The Black Beauty.
Oh, sure. Mm-hmm.
The Black Beauty, right? A love of horses, always have. And when I lived in Colorado, I remember helping out a girlfriend. She has a little farm of nothing but beautiful horses. And there was this one particular horse that would always nudge me. And every time something, if I was going through something, I was sad, he would nudge me like, snap out of that, that's what the horse was saying in so many movements. And, but, the fact is, when you find something that you love and you read about it, you want more of it. And as I was growing up, I thought, what, this is beautiful. And I'm going to introduce this to my kids when they grow up. And sure enough, they are readers today, because every time they give me a good grade, we would go shopping at the bookstore. And that was like candy in a candy store for them. And today they're avid readers, and I'm so proud of them. But that's something I did not have. And so
I think reading aloud, if you find a passage that you like, read it out loud. And the reason I say that is much of the spoken word, which was public, came from people such as Shakespeare or Chaucer. And granted, that's iambic pentameter, but the amount of thought that went into each of those phrases so that he could end with a rhyming couplet at the end actually began, I think, to shape the English language. And you think of, like half a league onward. You hear the horses of the Charge of the Light Brigade.
Oh, wow.
Or you may talk of gin and beer when you're quartered safe out here. You hear the soldier marching.
The march.
And so when you read a passage, read it out loud. See if you hear that meter. And then if you like that author, just read everything you can by that author, because you'll begin to pull that into your own style of writing, the understanding how they just suddenly make a vision appear in your head. It's just something that I've always done. Mainly, I'm the number 2 out of 7 boys.
Wow,
so
that's
I
a big
quite
family.
often would read to my younger brothers when, my
Yes.
mom, she liked to, and she used to do all the voices, which was great. I mean, when she read, if it
So
was...
she act them out.
Oh, yeah.
And that's
yeah.
something that I have in me, and a lot of people would say, I like, because I used to read to kids, I like the way you read, is because, when you
Yeah.
feel it, you act it out. And I had a tendency to do that, and my kids love that too. But yeah, that's wonderful to be able to do that, So what do you say to that, Robert? What is yours? What is your style?
What went through my mind as he was talking was that in most of my professional career, I never read a differential equation out loud.
Why is that? It wasn't in you, or you just didn't want?
It wouldn't help. It wouldn't help.
Well, it could be divisive, and then the problems would multiply. So,
Hey, that's cool. One of the things that's really nice about our group is that all the people who participate now and over the years are all very different personalities, writing styles,
Yes.
interests, backgrounds.
Quite the variety, yes.
And so when we put on a show, we have enough people so that we can bring that variety to the audience. When you go to a reading, even with a famous poet or writer, and if it's all just that one talking head standing at a poem going on for half an hour, it can it can stun you. And so we find in our work and our presentation efforts that the variety is the key to our effectiveness.
Okay, I like that. All of a sudden you're saying that, and I'm thinking, how would it work if I changed the accent to a Southern accent, a reading, just to do it, see what kind of reaction you may get. I don't know, that's something that just popped into my mind. Because, of course, that was something that I did do with some of my girlfriends back in Franklin. And we would go round and round, because here we speak Spanish, right? But yet we were able to pick up that accent and just play, role play. And it was a lot of fun. Creative way, I think, of being able to create a storyline and write.
well, we've picked up on something a few years back when Richard Barengarten was he's what's called a minor poet, which is not a minor designation in England, because they have major poets and minor poets. Americans say, "Oh, he's a minor poet," Well, a very good poet, but he had some of his work translated into Spanish. And when he did a reading at the Hagen Museum, and he may have done this he also had a talk at over at Pacific UOP. He had a Spanish reader, and the poem basically was an argument. And he would read in English, and then she started to read in Spanish, and he got up and he walked away. And then all of a sudden, she got up and she went down the other aisle and it was going, and they were reading this poem back and forth, and the dynamics. It was like, and it was like people that can't understand Spanish was like, okay, what'd you say? We said, listen to him. He's gonna, and then
Translate.
What he said. It was great. And you just you could just see everybody sat up in their seats, and it's like performance. The written word spoken should be a performance, in my opinion. I think he instilled
You're
that
right.
into us.
Yes, bravo.
There was another dimension to this too, which was perhaps as important to the students of Delta. He sent the poems, the Spanish version, ahead that he was going to use in his program to the class, and they studied and learned the program for maybe a month before the actual public reading occurred. So they were able to get much deeper into the feeling and the structure and of the poem itself as they
Yes.
went along.
Interesting.
Because I understand you can't translate verbatim because there's idioms, there's things that change. So the translator has to figure all of that out. What is being said in this language more than that, what is meant, what is the setting, and then there's maybe certain words you would use in another language that would, rather than translating straight across, would present that very feeling, that very picture that you're painting in that reader or listener's head.
Interesting. I like that. So what would you tell a young starting writer?
Get a job.
Get a job. Get a job. Is that difficult? Well, when you first begin. But you have so many youth today that have been writing. Quite the writers will collect, will write, won't put it away and won't show it to anybody because that's a personal info. That's their writing. But then you also have the writers that write beautifully. What would you tell a young writer that is wanting to become a writer and maybe even publish a book? What would be some of the advice that you'd give?
First thing I learned is that not all of your words are golden. You do a lot of self-editing, and I learned to read out loud in order to find those little verbal catches, the little snares that are there. Also, a critique is just that. It's someone from their perspective, their point in where they are in their own writing career, telling you what they think of what you have written. That isn't necessarily gold either.
Criticism.
It's and sometimes it's not constructive criticism.
Right.
Many times it is, especially within a group. You get so that that doesn't sound like you, or I don't think that's what you mean to say, and so or why aren't you using this word? So that's
and some
something
young
to take,
writers
yeah.
get really offended by that.
Yes.
They got to be able to take criticism well and apply it.
Yeah,
And not everybody can do that.
The schools don't teach that, nor do they encourage it.
There was a Unitarian minister that went off to the Civil War. He came back kind of trying to decompress. And since he had been a professor at a college, he also had written a tongue-in-cheek op-ed piece that actually led to the founding of Brown College. He was arguing against teaching women, you got to remember the times, teaching women the alphabet. But it was all tongue-in-cheek. But it was taken seriously, and people got offended, and they raised money. Part of his finding out what he wanted to do after kind of decompressing from several years of just vicious hand-to-hand Civil War combat was to start, he found out a neighbor girl wrote poems, but she never sought to have them published. And she brought them to him knowing he'd been a professor. And he began to work with her, and we can thank the stresses of war for bringing us Emily Dickinson's work. It would have stayed in that trunk.
Wow!
Exactly what you're talking
Yes,
about. Because
yes.
she was very probably agoraphobic nowadays is what they would call her. She didn't like to leave the house, didn't like to interact with people, but she had just enough backbone and self-worth to say, "I'm going to let him read these," and the rest is literary history. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't have much to add to that. That's a good story and a good analysis. I think the most important thing for writers at all levels of development to do is to write. And that sounds a little trite.
Keep a journal and just write your thoughts, anything that comes in mind, and who you come across, who you meet, what's happening.
And then you have to appreciate that a polished piece of work that maybe gets into this status has been rewritten maybe 30 or 40 times.
Wow. That's a bit too much. 30 or 40 times?
Yeah,
Okay.
A lot of the evolution of good writing for a particular piece of work in the writer is in the rewriting.
Okay. Would you like to share some more of your book? I mean, you have quite, you know what? I'd like for you to read a little bit from the one that you introduced, the very first one, that one there.
Sharon's Daughter?
Yes, that one is, now it's an award winner.
Yes.
And I was just wondering, what drove you to write that particular book?
My books have mostly been happenings.
Happening. So true life experiences.
No. Just when the way I write a book this big, I don't use a plot and an outline because I don't even know what the story's about when I start, because the characters haven't come into existence yet.
Okay, because it could
And the
change.
characters
Well,
are the
it's
ones that
constantly
drive the
change.
story, and
Right.
and it's the characters in conflict that drive the story. And so I tend to begin by writing scenes. I just take a character and I put him in a scene, and then I try to make something happen and see what does happen. And then after I build up a pile of those, the story begins to evolve.
Interesting.
And I'll read you something out of here.
Quick note to students out there: do learn the classics. You'll recognize Sharon as the barge man that carries souls across the river Styx.
Yep.
Wow.
Yes. And you might say, well, what in the hell does that have to do with anything? Well, that's the way the story is about a woman. It's a hero's journey story. And it has all the elements of mythology and in it. And it just expresses how she felt in the middle of the Civil War battlefields one time, wondering, what is her life about? What is she trying to do? What is going on around her? And she said she felt like rowing these souls across the river of hatred. And I started off with a little tiny poem here. It says, "The Cannoneer," because she ended up as a colonel in the army, and I won't tell you how that came about. The Cannoneer: war kills rudely, no gender accepted. Limbs severed crudely, visage is dented. Honor made token, ceremony brief, promises broken, no payment for grief. Rows of men bend and sway with each cannon roar. Cannon shot mows flesh like hay, making room for more. Blood does ooze across the slope. God's mercy on my soul, I cannot lose this clash of hope. I'm called to take hate's toll. This begins in February of 1861. This is the start of the story. A cold, late afternoon shroud of northeast air had pushed down out of Canada, embraced the landscape, and coaxed a light drizzle of powdery snow, which scurried across the streets and walks of Zionsville, Indiana. During that afternoon's brief period of indeterminate progression from day to night, you could see the sundial in front of the courthouse, but it cast no shadow across its face. A crow, cawing, portended a time for malevolence, a time for unseen evil acts. The lamplighters on foot and horse had not yet made their rounds, so that the yellow-orange aura that emanated from the kerosene lamps of the Heavenly Sounds musical clock shop provided a sharp contrast with the darkened windows and nearby stores of the gray-white backdrop of the city. I'll go on just a little farther.
Please do.
Inside, 3 people, their backs to the window, stood close together, bending over a workbench. In intense concentration, they worked, they moved and turned, a dance propelled by the incessant ticking, clicking, and chiming of the clocks, which crowded together across the room's walls and tables. "I have a present for you, Mr. Lincoln," said Lucretia Mitchell, smiling at the assembly of wires, clock parts, and dynamite. "Hold the striker flange, then fold the coiled band down under this clip and start the barrel moving. Let go of the flange and close the lid gently, said Ben Slocum to a man he and Lucretia called Gunter, as he folded the connection wires and placed the music box with its carved angel guardians into a black tooled leather satchel. You have 93 seconds to get away. That's enough.
Wow. Such colorful writing. You make me feel it and I can visualize it.
Thank you.
Your words are powerful.
They're 25 cents a piece.
Is that all? Now, I mentioned something to Robert, and I truly mean it. I would love to have you back and have more of the readers, the writers, and more of the readings that they have put together themselves. But also consider having a show right here on your community radio, since we are at tvosj.org, the voice of San Joaquin. We used to be KXVS, we're no longer. We're now the voice of San Joaquin. And pretty soon, I have to share with you, but Tracy, yes, we have a radio station in Tracy now, and it's 89.5 FM, and that's KBCC, Tracy. Yes, we are a local nonprofit multimedia community broadcasting network. But the invite is there to have your own show.
We'd like that.
This is a community radio.
We'd like that.
Would love to have you both back, and yeah, maybe we can create something here.
We have some women writers, and we have some people who play instruments as well as write. And
So we have some musicians as well, okay?
Yeah, so we can
Wonderful.
bring some real variety to it.
Yes. Okay, would love to do that.
Thank you for having us today.
You know, it's been a treat. Any shout outs, any acknowledgments that you'd like to make right now? To anybody out there.
Oh,
Caught you off guard.
Mother, you died a few years ago. But we all love you.
Jim?
We do have a member who has passed that we miss a lot, and that
Michael
was
Duffett.
Michael Duffett. He was a professor over at Delta College.
Delta.
Towards the end of his career, he taught many places: Japan, Hawaii, British, and his command of the English language. It is our mother tongue for the English speakers, and
Yes.
he was as stern with his friends as he was with his students. So it made us better writers.
Oh, wonderful. Shout out to him then. Shout out to his family as well. So really consider that, okay? Would love to have you back.
Okay.
And yeah, we could sit down and talk about what we could do because, like I said, this is a community radio station and the invitation is there for you both. And you know what? I wanted you to tell us just a little bit more about the mission statement, and if we can have other individuals that may show interest in being part of this organization, what is required to be able to be part?
Just an interest in showing up and participating. We don't really have any criteria. We've had, I think over the years, I have a list that has about not quite 50 names on it of people who've come in and participated in 1, 2, 3 meetings maybe.
Do you have to have a book published? Do you have to
No,
have
no.
writings? No?
No.
So
no.
beginners, are welcome?
Yes.
The
Oh,
novice
bless your
writer,
heart.
the published writer, both equal standing in our group. So
That is wonderful. Okay.
And
We
the
can-
best way to get hold of us is to come by the Hagen Museum on the first Thursday of every month.
First Thursday of every month. Is there
From
a
s-
phone number in case somebody out there would like to ask some questions? Or how can they get a hold of you?
Well, you can use my email address.
Okay, put it out there, please.
That's rreinarts22 at comcast.net.
At comcast.net. Okay. And that's I'm going to go ahead and spell it out, RREINARTS at comcast.com, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Dot net.
.net. Oh, sabor.net. All right. I noticed you gave me a lot of cards here. You have quite the titles
We
here.
wear different hats.
Commissioner, okay, and this is Commissioner on Aging. Are you still active? Are you still actually?
Yeah, that's a county. I'm a county commissioner.
Yes.
And still aging, too.
And still 18? I think we all are. I know I am. Okay. And then you also, Tuleburg Press.
Yeah, I'm on
You're
the
part-
board of Tuleburg Press.
Yes.
And I'm going to have them do an interview too one of these days.
And they, matter of fact, they've already been here, and I was happy to have them. Such beautiful people, and so yeah, they're due for a follow-up. That's for sure. And come one of our events, our little fundraiser event, we were able to get some free books, which I'm big on that. To be able to give away to the children out there and to adults as well. At one of our fundraisers, which is a reunion, and it brings all everybody together here. And matter of fact, we moved it from Oak Grove Regional Park to now Weber Point, and it was August 11th, and it was such a beautiful event, celebration of the arts. And I had a booth there, books galore. And of course, they helped us out to be able to get and find free books, which I thank them in a big way because they made it possible. So I noticed that you also have other, let's see, you gave me so many cards here that I thought, okay, this is wonderful. You're also a writer, and you have your own business. And is this is it, right? This is the Heritage Writers Community.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Is it okay to give out that information
Sure.
on air?
Sure.
In case individuals out there that are listening would like to get, in contact with you. And okay, of course, it is, I'm having a hard time looking at it. I think it's my eyes that are not all that good. Again, we're talking about aging, so yes, eyesight goes too. And it is socsys@comcast.net. And that's Heritage Writers Community. Okay. All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? And, maybe a little shout out to the young writers out there?
Come on down.
Come on down and be part of this wonderful organization. It's been a treat. Thank you so much. You must come back, and so you could do some more readings, and love everything you shared.
We have some other characters too in our crew that we'd like to expose you to.
Okay. Would love to meet the characters. So.
What do you mean, other characters?
You know what I mean. Good night, all.
All right.
Thank you so much. Okay, you heard it right here, the voice of San Joaquin in Stockton, California. Thank you so much for tuning in. Do appreciate you. Remember, you could always contact me right here at 209-467-4455. And you know what? If you have an event that's coming up, if you have something that you would like to share with the community, all you have to do is bring on over here one of your little flyers, whatever you may have to share, because we're not just audio, but we're also visual. We're also TV. So all you have to do is drop it off over here at 231 Bedford Road in Stockton, California. Yes, off the Miracle Mile. You can find us here. Not hard at all to find. Okay, so thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Betty Ramirez right here on Sabor Latino.